Psalm 1 and 10 is not considered a reference to the Messiah by the Jewish rabbis, since King David called his son, the Messiah, my Lord. How is this argument articulated? The argument made by Jewish rabbis is that Psalm 1 and 10 cannot be considered a reference to the Messiah because in the psalm, King David refers to the Messiah, his son, as my Lord. The reasoning is that it is unusual for a father, King David, to refer to his son, the Messiah, as my Lord, as this would imply the Messiah's superiority over the king. This is seen as contradictory to the typical expectation that the Messiah would be a descendant of King David and subject to him. The rabbis interpret this as evidence that Psalm 110 is not a messianic prophecy, but rather speaks of a different figure, perhaps a priest-king, rather than the Messiah, who would be David's descendant.
What is the Jewish interpretation of the phrase, my Lord, in Psalms 110? Does it refer to the Messiah, son of David? The interpretation of Psalms 110, particularly the phrase, my Lord, found in verse 1, varies significantly within Jewish scholarship and does not uniformly refer to the Messiah, son of David. This psalm is one of the most debated texts when it comes to its application and implications in Jewish thought. Here's a detailed look into the interpretation. The verse in question, Psalms 110 verse 1, reads, "The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool." The key terms here are the Lord. This is the tetragrammaton representing the ineffable name of God in the Hebrew Bible. My Lord, Ladoni. This is the term that causes most of the debate about the identity of the figure mentioned here. Jewish interpretations. 1. Not necessarily messianic. In traditional Jewish interpretation, the phrase my Lord is not automatically associated with the messianic figure. Rashi, the medieval French rabbi and commentator, interprets my Lord as referring to Abraham, seeing the psalm as a dialogue between God and David about Abraham. According to Rashi, David is calling Abraham my Lord out of respect and reverence. Other interpretations might consider my Lord as referring to a contemporary king or leader, possibly even a high priest, rather than a messianic or eschatological figure. 2. Literal and figurative interpretations. Some Jewish commentators might interpret the psalm figuratively, seeing my Lord as an archetype for righteous leadership, without necessarily pinpointing it as the Messiah. The Talmud, Nedarim 32, suggests that David is speaking to himself, using my Lord, in a poetic manner to express humility and devotion to God's will, which can be a common technique in Hebrew poetry. Conclusion. In Judaism, Psalms 110 verse 1, and the phrase my Lord is generally not interpreted as a direct reference to the Messiah, son of David. More often, it is seen as referring to either a historical figure like Abraham or David himself, or used in a metaphorical sense for godly leadership. The messianic interpretation is more typical of Christian exegesis, where this psalm is often cited in the New Testament as evidence of Jesus' divine appointment and his role as the Messiah. In Jewish thought, such an interpretation is less emphasized, focusing instead on diverse and historically contextual readings.